Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The village lay nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by dense forests and high mountains that shielded it from the outside world. The people who lived there had grown accustomed to their quiet, predictable lives. The days were marked by the rhythm of the seasons, the harvests, and the gentle passage of time. It was a place where everyone knew each other's name, where the past was as familiar as the faces that gathered in the town square each morning. But all that changed the night the storm arrived at it was unlike any storm the villagers had ever seen. The sky, usually clear and bright, turned an unnatural shade of green as the wind howled through the trees, bending their sturdy trunks as if they were mere twigs. Lightning split the sky in jagged arcs, followed by thunder that shook the very ground. The rain fell in sheets, not in the usual rhythmic patter, but in a deluge that drowned out all other sounds. It was as if the world itself was being torn apart, and the villagers could do nothing but huddle inside their homes, praying for it to pass. When morning came, the storm had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The sky was a pale, cloudless blue, the air still and silent. The only evidence of the storm's fury was the fallen branches and the flooded fields. The villagers emerged from their homes cautiously, exchanging wary glances as they surveyed the damage. It wasn't long before they noticed something far more unsettling than the destruction outside. Anna was the first to see it. She had lived in the village her entire life, a widow now for 5 long years since her husband, Paul, had died in a tragic accident. She was used to the routines of her days, to the familiar weight of grief that settled in her chest each morning and the comfort of knowing that nothing in her life would ever change. But that morning, as she went to wash her face in the old, tarnished mirror that hung above her wash basin, she froze. The woman staring back at her from the mirror was not the Anna she knew. This Anna was smiling, a soft, contented smile that Anna had not worn in years. Her reflection looked younger, her hair still dark and full, her eyes bright with life. But it wasn't just the difference in appearance that shocked Anna, it was the man standing beside her in the reflection. Paul. He was alive, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, his face as she remembered it, full of love and warmth. Anna stumbled back from the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. This couldn't be real. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, but the reflection remained. It was as if the mirror was showing her a different life, a life where Paul had never died, where they had grown old together, still as much in love as they had been the day they married. Across the village, similar scenes were playing out. Thomas, the village leader, stood in front of the large mirror in his study, staring at a version of himself that was both familiar and alien. The Thomas in the mirror wore an expression of stern authority, his eyes cold and calculating. This Thomas was draped in fine clothes, a heavy chain of office around his neck, and he stood in a grand room, much larger and more opulent than the simple study Thomas knew. The reflection's surroundings were filled with symbols of power and wealth, but the expression on the face in the mirror was one of arrogance and cruelty, a far cry from the humble, respected leader Thomas believed himself to be. Then there was Elena, the outsider. She had come to the village only a few years ago, a young woman with a mysterious past. The villagers had been wary of her at first, but she had slowly earned their trust. Elena had always felt like she didn't truly belong, that there was another life waiting for her somewhere far away. Now, as she looked into the mirror in her small cottage, she saw that life. The reflection showed a woman standing in a bustling city, surrounded by paintings and sculptures. This Elena was an artist, successful and admired, her eyes filled with a confidence that the real Elena had never known. The village was soon buzzing with the strange news. Everyone had seen something different in their reflections, something that didn't match the reality they knew. Some were excited, others terrified. Old grievances began to resurface as villagers compared their reflections, some seeing better lives, others worse. The peaceful community started to fracture as fear and curiosity took hold. Anna couldn't stop thinking about the reflection she had seen. It was a life she had dreamed of, a life where Paul was still by her side. She found herself returning to the mirror again and again, longing for the comfort of that alternate reality. The more she looked, the more she wanted to stay in that world, to believe that it could somehow be real. But with each glance, the differences between her reflection and her real life became more glaring. The clothes she wore, the expressions on their faces, the details of the room, they were all just slightly off, as if the reflection was trying to lure her into a world where she didn't truly belong. Thomas, on the other hand, was horrified by what he saw. He had always prided himself on being a fair and just leader, but the man in the mirror was everything he feared becoming. The reflection showed him a path he could have taken, one where he used his power to dominate rather than serve. It made him question every decision he had ever made, every compromise, every moment of doubt. The more he stared at the reflection, the more he felt a darkness creeping into his thoughts, a whisper that told him this was who he truly was. Deep down, Elena was caught between two worlds. The reflection showed her a life of success and recognition, everything she had ever wanted. But it was a life without the village, without the people she had come to care for, without the quiet peace she had found in the forest. She began to wonder if she had made the wrong choice, if she should have pursued her dreams instead of settling for a life of obscurity. The reflection became a constant reminder of what she could have been, and she started to resent the life she had chosen. As the days passed, the village grew more divided. Some villagers became obsessed with their reflections, spending hours in front of their mirrors, trying to understand the world they saw. Others avoided mirrors altogether, too frightened of what they might see. The once close-knit community began to unravel as old tensions flared up and new fears took hold. One evening, a meeting was called in the town square. The villagers gathered, their faces etched with worry and confusion. Thomas stood before them, trying to maintain his composure, but the strain was evident in his voice. "We have all seen things that cannot be explained," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "These reflections, they are not our true selves. They show us a world that is not real, a world that could have been, but is not. We must not let these images control us." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, but others looked skeptical. Anna stood near the back, her eyes downcast. She hadn't spoken to anyone about what she had seen, but the longing in her heart was almost unbearable. She wanted so desperately to believe that the reflection could become real, that she could somehow step into that world and leave her pain behind. Elena watched from the edge of the crowd, her mind racing. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The reflection showed her a life of success, but it was a life without the village, without the peace she had found here. Could she really give all that up? Was the reflection a blessing or a curse? As the villagers argued and debated, an old woman stepped forward. She was known as the village elder, a keeper of ancient lore and wisdom. Her face was lined with age, her eyes sharp and clear. The crowd fell silent as she approached Thomas, her gaze steady and unyielding. "These reflections are not mere illusions," she said, her voice firm and commanding. "They are windows into another world, a world that exists parallel to our own. The storm that brought them was not natural, it was a cosmic event, a convergence of forces beyond our understanding. The reflections show us what could have been, what might still be, if we choose to embrace them." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Some looked hopeful, others terrified. Anna's heart leaped at the elder's words. Could it be true? Could she really step into that world and live the life she had always wanted? But beware, the elder continued, her voice growing darker. These worlds are not without consequence. To enter the reflection is to leave this world behind. You cannot have both. You must choose, and once the choice is made, there is no turning back. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. The villagers looked at one another, uncertainty etched on their faces. The idea of leaving everything behind, of stepping into an unknown world, was both terrifying and tempting. Thomas felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He couldn't allow the villagers to be swayed by this madness. "We cannot abandon our lives for a mere reflection," he said, his voice rising with determination. "This village is our home, our reality. We must find a way to close this portal, to return to the lives we know." The elder nodded slowly, her expression grave. "There is a way," she said. "A ritual that can close the portal and restore the balance between worlds. But it requires the will of the people. The village must decide as one. You must choose whether to stay in this world or to step into the reflection." Anna's mind raced. Could she really give up everything she had known for a chance at happiness? The reflection offered her a life with Paul, a life she had lost so many years ago. But was it real? Could it ever truly replace the life she had lived, the memories she had made? Elena felt a deep conflict within her. The reflection showed her the life she had always dreamed of, but it was a life without the village, without the peace she had found here. Could she really give all that up for a chance at success? Was the reflection a dream or a nightmare? The villagers spent the next few days in a state of quiet turmoil. Some gathered in small groups, discussing the elder's words, debating the risks and rewards of stepping into the reflection. Others kept to themselves, lost in their thoughts, trying to make sense of the choices before them. Anna spent long hours in front of her mirror, staring at the reflection of herself and Paul. It was so real, so vivid, that she could almost believe it was true. But every time she reached out to touch the glass, her hand met only cold, hard surface. She knew the decision she had to make, but it tore at her heart. Thomas struggled with his own demons. The reflection had shown him a version of himself that he despised, a man who had sacrificed everything for power. He knew he couldn't allow the villagers to be swayed by the temptation of the reflection. But could he really convince them to stay in a world where they had already seen what could be? Elena wandered the village, her mind in turmoil. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong. The reflection showed her a life where she was admired and successful, but it was a life without the village, without the connections she had made here. Could she really give all that up for a chance at her dreams? Finally, the day came for the village to make its decision. The elder gathered them in the town square, her face solemn as she prepared to perform the ritual. The villagers stood in a circle, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "This is your choice," the elder said, her voice steady. "To stay in this world or to step into the reflection. But know that once the choice is made, there is no turning back." One by one, the villagers spoke. Some, like Anna, chose to stay in the reflection world, believing it offered them a second chance at happiness. Others, like Thomas, chose to stay in the real world, understanding that their lives, however flawed, were still their own. Elena hesitated, torn between her dreams and the life she had come to know. But in the end, she made her choice, stepping into the circle with the others who had chosen to stay in the reflection world. It was a leap of faith, a chance to find the life she had always wanted. The elder performed the ritual, chanting ancient words that echoed through the village. The air grew thick with energy, the ground trembling beneath their feet as the portal between worlds began to close. Those who had chosen to stay in the reflection world felt a strange sensation, as if they were being pulled into the mirror, their bodies dissolving into light. For those who remained, the village slowly returned to normal. The mirrors and reflections were restored, showing only the reality they knew. But the experience had left its mark. Relationships were altered, old wounds were healed or deepened, and the village was forever changed. Anna felt a strange sense of peace as she returned to her home, the reflection of Paul no longer haunting her. She had made her choice, and though it was painful, she knew it was the right one. She would carry the memory of the reflection with her, a reminder of what could have been, but also a lesson in accepting the life she had. Thomas resumed his duties as village leader, but with a new sense of humility. The reflection had shown him the darkness within himself, but it had also given him the strength to choose a different path. He vowed to lead with compassion and fairness, to never let power corrupt him. Elena found herself in a new world, a world of art and creativity, but also one of solitude. She had chosen the reflection, believing it would bring her happiness, but she quickly realized that it was not the life she had imagined. The success and recognition came with a price, and she often found herself longing for the quiet peace of the village she had left behind. But she had made her choice, and she would live with it, creating beauty in a world that was both new and strangely familiar. As the years passed, the memory of the storm and the reflections faded, becoming part of the village's folklore, a tale told to children on cold winter nights. But for those who had lived through it, the experience was a turning point, a moment when they had been forced to confront their true selves and make a choice that would shape the rest of their lives. And so the village continued, its people living their lives in the shadow of what might have been, but also in the light of what was. They had seen the world in the reflection, and they had chosen their path. It was a choice that would stay with them, in their hearts and in their minds, a reminder that the world we see is not always the world that is, but it is the world we must live in.